how they can work with you. So I'm always excited for that. Hello and welcome you guys to the Tough Woman table. I know we're about a minute late. Excuse me, my fault, you guys. So as you guys come in, say hey, let us know where you're coming from. YouTube, Facebook. If you're catching us on the podcast, drop some comments in the podcast there. Let us know what you think. Make sure whatever platform you guys are on, please like, subscribe, and just comment and show us some love. And if you're watching this live right now, please share so that I can continue getting more eyes on these messages, these stories. This is so incredibly important to continue having these conversations and bringing everybody to the table so that they can take their seat and join in, guys. So hello and welcome to the Tough Woman Roundtable, you guys. Oh my God, I'm so excited. This table where I invite some amazing people to pull a seat up and join together in creating epic conversation. At Tough Woman, I believe that all people have the power within themselves to live life authentically, free from fear, confident in who they are, and empowered to go out and create a life that sets their soul on fire. Woo! Oh my. I also believe that by one person showing up in their power, we give other people permission to step into their own power as well, thus giving us the opportunity to rise together, you guys. And it's through this joint rising that we move ourselves and humanity forward to a more beautiful way of living and being. So you guys pull up a seat, tune in with us, and join us as we create epic conversations that move and remind y'all how truly powerful you guys are. So woohoo to that. Oh, look at this. Sarah says, hello, ladies. Hey, girl.
Hey.
I'm so happy to see her on here. Oh man, she's been on the panel herself. So thank you for being on here, Sarah. So you guys, I'm going to let my guests introduce themselves, starting with Ashley here. I am really happy to have you ladies on. So thank you so much. Ashley, if you will tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and how you show up in the world.
Thank you so much, Ashley. I am so excited to be here with you and Amber. My name is Ashley Rainsbarger. I am a subconscious growth and money mindset coach for coaches. So I help them heal the fear of success so that they can create the next level of income in their business. And just speaking of, you were talking a little bit before we went live, and it's just really my passion, and it's exciting for me to help other coaches believe in their power, because if we can do that, then that really lifts up a bunch of people. So that's what I do.
Remember that. Heck yeah. I think if more of us just went through the world, like turning back around and, just putting a hand down and helping somebody come up, it would just be, I think it'd be amazing what we'd see in the world. But Amber, you'll tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Good evening or good morning, depending upon where you are in the world. My name is Amber Hall. I'm an innovation and product strategist by day, but in my spare time and every day, I am super passionate about helping women predominantly in male-dominated spaces earn a seat at the table and get the seat at the table that they've already deserved in a lot of ways. And so I'm happy to be here to share that perspective around really the conversation and how it needs to shift with regards to women showing up in those spaces confidently.
I'm excited for that too. I'm excited for this whole conversation. I think fear is something that's really rampant right now, especially in all the different ways. But this one right here, fear of taking up space at the table and fear of success, I think that's one that plagues a lot of women that we really just don't talk about enough. We talk about fear of failure but it's like what happens when we get there. I know one thing for me that comes up is that imposter syndrome. It's really rampant, and that's, can you do this? So I'm interested to really get to y'all's perspective. So let's dive right into it. And Amber, I think I want to start with you, and because I think this is a really neat perspective, but women, and especially women in male-dominated industries, having that fear of showing up at the table, like what has really been your experience and your observation of how this plays out, especially in like these, like you said, these women who are in these male-dominated industries and don't feel like they can.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a daily experience. I mean, there are more days still than I care to count where I am the only woman in the room in many meetings, beyond being the only Black or whatever. And so my experience early in career as an engineer was largely centered around, being the only woman in the whole engineering function, or one of maybe three. And speaking up at tables, is always a challenge. I think in multiple ways. When you're early in career, there's just the bias of you're young, you don't know what you're talking about, right? But there's the added bias of being a woman. And then if you layer on being a woman of color, there's additional microaggressions and bias that they face in the workplace. And so for me, I genuinely believe one of my fundamental values is that I don't think you can't change what you aren't present for. So if you want to affect change, if you want to impact the decisions that are being made at a table, if you want to impact the product and how it's being designed, whatever the scenario is, you have to use your voice. And I think you first have to start with really believing that you have something to say, that what you have to say is important, really getting grounded in that, and then making the decision, putting one step in front of the other to speak up. And speaking up takes courage. It also takes a great deal of humility. But I think that men won't hear us unless we talk, right? If we stay silent, we will never be heard. So we have to speak up. There's no way around it. And you have to constantly be willing to kind of knock at that door, right? And figure out a way within your environment, your experiences, to start to be heard. And the first time you may not be heard at all. The second time, maybe they heard parts of what you had to say, but eventually building up the mental fitness, right? To step into that space and to take ownership confidently with what you have to say, and then project that in a way that needs to be heard. I have in a variety of experiences had moments where I was not heard. And it's devastating, right? It doesn't feel good to not be heard, or, someone mansplains you back, or they hear parts of what you have to say. And I think that in those moments specifically, it's saying, it's really pushing at, but I have something to say here. Pause, right? I have something to say here, and pushing at it until people really hear you. But fundamentally, this is about building up the mental stamina, right? If you think about like even just exercising, right? Or anything in your life where you're trying to reach a goal, right? It's the reps that you put in that gets you to the Olympic status, the champion status, the best to ever do it status, right? It's day in, day out committing to, I'm going to show up to this thing authentically, the best way that I can, the best way that I know how, and learn, right? And build that fitness. So just like you would put the effort into your body, you have to put the effort into showing up to those spaces. And you may, with strength, right? I talked about this earlier on my Instagram today. With holding weight, right? It's resistance. You inherently will feel force coming back at you, right? It's inherent to the situation. So you have to be willing to exercise, right? That effort on your part, emotionally, mentally, psychologically, and it will take work, but you could eventually get there.
Hmm.
And I was going to say, I like how you put that, because again, we have to, it also comes down to having to be okay with not being liked. And I think this is something I definitely want to dive into, because this is interesting. We look back at the programming that were brought along as little girls growing up. Well, be nice. You want everybody to like you, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like that's something we're going to be able to dive into in a minute. But I would love your thoughts too, Ashley, on how do you observe, like, you working with these coaching clients? What does it look like, working with women who just have that innate fear of showing up at the table and taking space? Because I think there's a lot of pieces to it. But, I would love your perspective from like a coaching aspect, and seeing how that plays out with female coaches and taking up space in some of these arenas, where we don't feel we belong.
Yeah, definitely. And I love everything that Amber just said. I think that as women, we tend to, and what I've noticed a lot is that we tend to want people to just notice us, and notice that we're working hard, and notice that we do deserve a seat at the table. And we forget that we, number one, have to ask for a seat at the table. And number two, we have to tell people that we deserve it. And not only do we have to tell other people that we deserve it, we have to constantly remind ourselves that we deserve it, because it all comes down to the core beliefs about who you are and what you believe, and what you believe about to be true about yourself, and what you believe to be true about the world around you. I think, the general difference between men and women tends to be that men are very strategical, right? And they're very logical, and it's very easy to kind of lay out a logical plan and then just go follow that plan, and it works, right? And with women, we get the strategy, but there's a bunch of emotion that plays into it. There's a bunch of thoughts as we take action on that strategy that says, oh, but you're not really good enough for this. You're not pretty enough for this. You're not smart enough for this. You're not, you haven't done enough to deserve this. And it's really, really easy to give into those thoughts. And it's because we are taught from a very young age by our parents, by the education system, by society just in general, that we're small, and we don't get, it's not okay for us to be loud. It's not okay for us to be rowdy. It's not okay for us to be confrontational. And so we go into life and business having this deep fear of confrontation, of standing up for what we want, because people might look at us funny, or they might judge us for wanting more for ourselves, right? When men, they don't get the same criticism. They don't get the same criticism that we do. They don't, if a man speaks up, he's being bold, but if a woman does it, she's a bitch or a witch, right? So, I think it really goes back to, and I'm always going to come at this from like a perspective of mindset. And when it comes to, and my clients are primarily women, I've had some men, but by primarily women, it really comes down to, what is it that I want? What action, what strategy is it that I need to take in order to get there? And since I know that logically to be true, what is it that how am I getting in my own way? What thoughts are causing me not to actually take those actions? And once you get down to that, really asking yourself, well, why? What is it that, what is the deeper fear? What is it that I'm really, really scared of? Because it tends to come down to, I'm afraid of people judging me for wanting more, even though I am a woman that wants more.
I love that. Yeah, I resonate with that a lot. Because there is, it's like when you're in the career world, and Amber, I feel like you might be able. It's like if you're too ambitious, you're cold. You're an ice queen, whatever. Like, oh God, that's my favorite one. You're a man eater, right?
Yeah.
She's a man eater, So it's like when you want, but then my favorite part of it is like the double-edged sword. It's like, then if you don't speak up enough, oh well, you need to speak up. Like, get right there. Yeah. So the one thing I want to, that you both have actually like really come into was the fear of asking. So this is actually something that I was discussing. I had a live before I did this because I felt really called to, and I talked about setting the boundary of clear expectations is if you, in your relationships, right? And I feel like one of the things that keeps us as women from going, having the things that we want is not that clear understanding necessarily of what we want, but not being able to ask for it, not just being able to clearly say, this is how I want, this is what I want. So, and that really kind of leads me to the question is like, do you feel that women are really given the support and the programming to ask for what we want? This was something that I was told to me, like in sales, women just don't ask and men do. So actually, let me rephrase that. I'd love to know your thoughts on why do you think it's such something that is not taught to women? Because I want to say, why aren't women? I know we're not. So why do you feel like the programming is put it up? Oh, ass. Oh, it's all good. I was like, what? Did that come from me? It's all good. So yeah, I'd like your thoughts. We'll start with you, Ashley, on why do you feel like women don't know how to really go out there and ask for what they want, or why we're not shown that support and that same programming that men are shown?
Yeah, I think it just comes down to like, your basic everyday traditional standards, like your traditional upbringing. I know, like my grandmother, she probably couldn't imagine doing the work that I'm doing now. I remember that she, I think it was, I remember one time sitting like in the living room with my grandmother and my daughter when she was a baby, and my husband was changing her diaper. And my grandmother was like, he changes diapers? Like, like your husband does that? And I remember my husband's mother making comments about how he would give baths and he would help them get dressed, right? Like he would do these motherly things, right? And so I think it really just comes down to what is perceived in our society as traditional values. It's just traditional that the woman stays home and she does these feminine tasks. You know, it's not okay for her to be the breadwinner. It's not okay for her to do things that a man typically does. And so whether or not you're like directly told that, you see that as an example. You see it from your own mother. You see it from your grandmother. You see it, you know, in relationships and the way that, you know, men act and women act. And so it just becomes a subconscious program. It is truly a subconscious program that is running over and over and over and over and over again in our brains. And so we're really getting to a time now where people, and I think maybe our generation is really desiring to break that subconscious pattern. And we're starting to have more conscious thoughts about what we want, and how just because we've been taught something is true for years and years and years doesn't mean that it's necessarily true. Right now, you have to be willing to question those, you know, what your beliefs are. You have to be willing to question what you've been taught and what you've been shown to be true.
Okay, hold on there. Great.
Yeah, I have the semi-opposite experience. I was raised in a household. I'm the only child, and I was raised in a household where my parents were very much, you can be whatever you want to be. You know, the sky's the limit. The galaxy's the limit for you. You know, as long as you work hard and put in the time. And so while I watched gender roles be fairly traditional, my mom was a really, I mean, you know, on her own, she would have been considered a middle class income earner. But together, you know, they definitely brought in quite a bit of income. And I had a really privileged, like financially, childhood. But on the flip side, I think what I experienced was, even though I was raised in a household of being, you know, taught that I could be anything, going out into the real world is where I saw the struggle, right? So I remember telling my uncle I wanted to be a doctor at 6, and he's like, "You can't be a doctor, go be a nurse. Women are nurses," right? Or, you know, going into engineering school and people being like, "Women don't do that," you know? And so for me, I think what's been interesting is I've always had my parents in the back of my mind reminding me that I could be bold. I think what I have faced is the external world telling me to dim my light, right? To not be so loud, to not be so vocal about what I want in this world. And so I have had to deal with coming from a place of resilience and confidence and going out into the world being told you can't possibly be as great as you want to be, and having to figure out, I struggled with what I'll call modulating for a while, you know, which is just depending upon who I was talking to, depending what room I was in, I would maybe like tone down the story or version of myself or my goals or whatever. And, you know, it's kind of going back to the conversation around taking up space. Like at some point I just said, no. How about no? How about you're going to take me exactly as I am, and your discomfort with my presence is not my problem.
Yeah.
It's just not my problem. And I'm not going to waver or negotiate with you on my value. You don't get to tell me what my value is. And so I think for me, it has been challenging to, I think, really own that as an adult, because the world is like, but you're supposed to be this, like, you're a woman and you can't possibly want to be a CEO of a company and you can't possibly want, you know, all of those types of things. And I'm like, no, but we're gonna just take up space. We're gonna be here. And I don't care that you don't like it. I think that getting past the I no longer care about what you think about me, right? I think overcoming that, which is a daily conversation with myself, but I think it's the we have each of us as individuals, going back to the conversation around mindset, like Ashley said, we as individuals have every opportunity to be our biggest advocate or our biggest critic. And we could take what the external world wants to say about us and turn that into the biggest criticism in the loudest voice. There's some crazy number out there that like we have on average like 60,000 conversations with ourselves so unconsciously throughout the day. Like we can say a lot of negative stuff to ourselves, but we have to be willing to dial into the advocate of ourselves. It starts with us first, and saying that you are going to define your life as you want it to be, and rise to that occasion and hold yourself accountable. And I think leaning into people that value that support that endorse that of you and themselves is where you can start to also build that confidence.
Yeah.
I'll mute myself. I was gonna say I really love that, being the biggest advocate. I think that that's something actually even I have recently struggled with, is really like hearing all that noise out here and losing touch with that voice. It's like, listen, you are phenomenal, you know? So that's something I want to touch on a little before we really start going into fear of success. Is what are your ladies' thoughts on how ways we can really start overriding that critic and getting in touch with our inner advocate, as Amber so eloquently put that? Because again, one of the things that's most important is to really understand, like, you know, it doesn't have to be fear all the time. Like, we know that fear helps keep us safe, but you know, how safe is too safe, right? You know what I mean? When do we realize, like you just said, Amber, that it's okay for us to take up space? That not only is it okay for us to take up space, but we are deserving of taking up space. Because what you both have so wonderfully put is, you know, the programming is not there to support us being these big people, being big, bold, awesome women. If you go back and I think you look throughout history, you see the relationship. It's like that. You want to talk about some programming. The relationship is that big, bold women die. Like, I feel like that's the programming. Like, look at Joan of Arc. She, you know, she did what she did and she got burned at the stake, ladies. There you go. So we, you know, it's not only traditional programming, but it's like the programming we come across. So I love your ladies' thoughts on how do we start overcoming that critic in our head, so that we can start tuning into our inner advocate, so we can begin taking up take our spot at the table. Because again, that's just like one part of the conversation. Then it's like, okay, well, when we get to the table, let's address the fear that's going to come from that. But ladies, Ashley, if you'd like to start, I'd love to know your thoughts on overcoming that inner critic, so that it's not continuing to keep you from showing up and taking up that space that we deserve.
Yeah, definitely. I think it really starts by even acknowledging the fact that we may even have we have a responsibility for taking up space at the table in a way that makes sense for us. So that can mean something different for each woman. But we have starting by thinking, you know, I have a responsibility for taking up space. I have a responsibility for sharing my voice. Sorry, I totally had a thought.
Know that.
I think here's what I was going to say. I think that we get really overwhelmed and we get really scared because we always have like this big, huge picture in mind, right? Like, we're not thinking about like what we have to do today or what we have to do this week. We're thinking about, oh, I want to write a book someday, or I want to be up on stage in front of a bunch of people, or I want to have a full client load, or whatever that is. And we get so overwhelmed by all the things we think that we have to do in order to get to that big picture dream. And then that's where like the emotional spinning really, really starts. Because once you have one negative thought about how I can't do that, even though you're not even technically maybe ready for that step yet, your step is much smaller. You know, we have all these, once you have one negative thought about that thing that you want that you may not be ready for, and it tells you that you're not good enough, then you have another one, and you have another one, and you have another one, and before you know it, everything is ruined, your life is over, your business is done, right? And there's, you know, you're just a failure, and you're never going to be good enough for anybody or anything, right? And so I think that we have to really tone it down and get really clear and get really logical about like, what is it that I want now? Like, what is it that I want this week? What is it that I want this month? Like, what does success look like for me? And forgetting about like the big picture scary thing. What are like those tiny steps that I can take in order for me to get there? I'm such a huge fan of journaling because I always say that, like, if you think about it, it's not good enough to think about it, because your brain, somebody reminded me today of this quote, and I don't know who said it. Your brain makes a good servant, but a terrible master, right? So instead of like thinking all these thoughts and spinning in emotional circles, really sitting down to like get clear with your thoughts. What is it that I want? What are the steps for me to get there? What are the stories that I'm making up about why I can't? Because they really are just stories. There's nothing that you want to do that maybe some powerful woman before you, hasn't done too, right? So what are the stories you're making up about why you, for some reason, can't? Because it really is just a story.
Amen. Well, and I love that you say your brain makes a good servant, but a terrible master. Someone talked to me, and I'll liken it to something like they said, when you feel an emotion, you realistically only feel that emotion for 90 seconds. Mm-hmm. What carries it on is the stories you begin telling yourself after that. And I have found that there have been some days where I will go into a tailspin of a narrative in my head, and 2 hours later, I come out and go, what happened to my life right now? But Amber, I'd like to take this spin a little bit and give it your perspective of what can women do, especially if they're in industries like yourself, where you're going after those big, bold, like being the only woman, or being the only Black woman in this industry, or where you're at. How can women overcome that that fear narrative in their head, so that they can take up space and start taking their seats at the table, start asking for the things they want? Because one thing I will give men a lot of credit for is they really can't ask, and that's not me I've seen this, I've been around enough men. Men are just like, I'm going to go in there, I'm going to go get the raise. I think it was like, I read a study, and they said that men were more likely to overcompensate for their capabilities. And women were more likely, it's like literally, oh, this is my favorite one. It's like men can look at a job description and go, you know what? I have 2 of 10 things. I'm going to go for it. And a woman will go, I only have 9 of 10 things. There's just no freaking way, so we don't go after the raises. We don't go after the positions. We don't, surely that can't happen. So Amber, I love your thoughts on how can women begin really creating solutions in this area.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. It's men tend to apply when they're about 50%. 40 to 50, sometimes 10% if you're Kanye. And then women tend to ask when they're about 90 to 95% ready. But I think first and foremost, I have two, it's a 2-part answer, because I don't believe in like there's a silver bullet. It's just, they're hard to come by. It often takes a multitude of things to get there. But the first and foremost thing I think you have to remember is that we each have a responsibility to love ourselves first. In life, period. Our relationship with ourselves is the most important relationship that we have. It is the person we spend the most time with. It's the body we spend the most time with, the heart, right? The mind, everything. And we as women tend to put ourselves last on the list, right? When we triage everything going on in our life, we put ourselves last. Not necessarily intentionally, but that's what happens because we prioritize everyone and everything else first. And I would really ask any woman listening to dig deep within themselves and ask themselves, how much do you love you? Do you actually know? And hopefully the answer is unconditionally and above all else, because if it is, then you know that you have to take care of yourself first. And that means loving on yourself. And loving on yourself means different things to different people. But at the end of the day, you have to be willing to give to you like you would someone else, right? If you think of a plant, I'm big on analogies, so forgive me, but you think of a plant, like the plant needs love. It needs the water and the sun and the good soil, right? And the right environment to thrive. We as individuals need the same. And so if you are nourishing your body, if you are placing yourself in the right environment, if you're right, all of those things end up mattering in the long run, right? And so we have to be willing to put ourselves first. And that means sometimes saying no to even the people that we love to make sure that we're taken care of. But I'll put it to you like this. Each one of us, we know we have that friend right, in our life that they come to us and they're like, they're upset about something, whether it's the boyfriend or the spouse or the girlfriend or the non-binary king and queen they are, what royalty that they are, whatever it is, right? Or something's going on at work or something's going on and they come to you in confidence, right? And they tell you about what they're heart aching over. 9 times out of 10, you're going to give that girlfriend the best pep talk you can ever give, right? You are hype woman full throttle, right? I've done it. I'm sure you've done it too, right? Be that for yourself. Be that for yourself, right? Like, I don't know what it is for you. I don't know if it's like putting on your favorite Beyonce song and standing in the mirror and banging on your chest and telling you you are that deal, like whatever it is for you, but you have to love on yourself. Like really love yourself, right? And whatever, like the best hype woman talk you've ever given to a friend or a loved one, like you should be giving to yourself daily, right? That's how I feel about it personally. The other part of the conversation with, you know, building up that confidence and getting that support, I find that women are more likely to not only just survive, but thrive in male dominated spaces when they have other women. Now, those other women don't necessarily have to be physically in their space, but they need other women to lean on, to rely on, to have those conversations with. So it's essentially the reverse. So just like when the friend comes to you and you should be loving on yourself like you love on them, you know, just it's the same. Like when women come to you with love and support, you grow, right? You can lick your wounds, get up the next day and keep moving. And we as women, we need that. I think differently than men do in a lot of different ways, but we need that mentorship. We need that advocacy. We need someone that we can call. So I always encourage women, particularly in male dominated spaces, and even in women, you know, when there's gender parity or far more representation, I still think that's even a better opportunity to capitalize on that in your workspace or whatever environment you're in. But to make sure that you have women in your life that you can go to have those tough conversations, to talk about your workplace trauma, to practice negotiating for that new promotion, to ask for the money that you know you already deserve, right? To ask for the benefits, to ask for the opportunity, to ask to lead the project, whatever it is. Women, right? That squad of women, that community of women is where we can get reps in. Because 9 times out of 10, we all have experiences that we can share with one another that says, okay, there's something there that I can take, something there that she said, something there that somebody else said, and I can put it all together, put my frame of reference on it, and now I'm even more confident to go out into the world and express myself and confidently take up space and ask for the things that I already deserve, that I've already earned, right? Because to your point, we as women tend to have imposter syndrome, even though we've already overqualified, we're already overeducated, we've already outworked, we've already outperformed, right? We've already done the work. But we are just so caught up in we can't possibly be good enough that we don't want to ask. But in reality, 9 times out of 10, the things we're already going to ask for or should be asking for, we earned and deserved days ago, months ago, years ago. So that's where I think that that circle of women really comes into play. But above all, you have to be willing to love on yourself and give yourself the nourishment and time, right? To step into that. Like you be willing to give yourself the best self-talk you could possibly give. And through those affirmations, that daily work, you build the reps and the stamina to continue on.
I love that. And I'll say, I'll piggyback on what you just said. One of the things that I do to remind myself to love myself every day is I have Google Assistant on my alarms. And I just discovered this with my phone, but I feel like everybody's got some kind of assistant routine they can do with their list. So 3 to 4 times a day, I have an alarm go off that just says really nice things to me. Like, I'm not even kidding you. It will go off, and I've got one that says, "Hey, you rock star, you are freaking killing it today." And then it'll tell me it loves me all the time. And I literally have people go, "Did your phone just tell you it loved you?" And I go, "Yes. Yes, it did." That's me. And they're like, what? I was like, yeah, it's a reminder to tell me how awesome I am. So,
That's great.
but again, we need somebody. We need that around us. We need to believe that we can make this happen. And touching base on the collab, having that team of women, I really wanted to talk about the fear of a woman being more successful. Like, how do we feel that operates, like being, the I guess the programming around women can't be mutually successful together. I'd like to have y'all's thoughts on how you see that operating in wherever you're at, because I feel like that's something that needs to be tackled too. That how do we start begin to erode that narrative that we cannot be mutually successful together? So, because I feel like there's a couple different kinds of fears of success, or fears around where we are. So, fear of taking up space, fear of success, fear of not having it perfect, but there's also that fear that one other woman's success is going to undermine our success. So how do we begin tapping into that piece? Because I feel like that's a huge part of the collective right now, is you see it happening. And I know that, again, back to like the male dominant industries, when you've got that messaging that there's 10 seats at the table and there's only room for 2 women, and you've got 4 women in the office, you know what I mean? That's when you get into that mean girl stuff. So it's like, how can we start really bringing in that atmosphere of just building each other up and recognizing that we can be successful together as women? And it is actually far more powerful when we collaborate and come together. So Ashley, I'd like your thoughts on how can we start overriding that and just coming to that space of sisterhood and recognizing that we have the ability to really, bring ourselves up to a new level.
Yeah, definitely. I think it really all comes down to my favorite T word, which is trust. And when I'm talking about trust, I'm talking about trust in self, trust in other people to support you, and then trust in your higher power to guide you. So it's really funny, how as women, we even though we kind of struggle, maybe some of us struggle to take up space. We also struggle to, we tend, a lot of us, especially ambitious women, tend to be really independent, really like driven, right? And we have this idea of what we want to create, and maybe we create a plan to do it and we set out to do it. We have a hard time trusting other people, and maybe especially trusting other women to support us on that journey. And so I think when it comes to women collaborating, we have to stop thinking of each other as competition and start thinking of each other as, just sisters, of just people who work together. I was watching the other night, that documentary about AOC on the Netflix. And I remember she said something about, in order for one of us to make it in, 100 of us have to try, right? And she was talking about the women running in the primaries. So I think, simply put, like, it comes down to trust. You're building trust in yourself to actually create it, but we can't do this alone. You cannot do this alone. You're not meant to do this alone. So going back to asking yourself those questions, what is so scary about trusting other people to support me? What is so scary about trusting other women to support me? Because at the end of the day, all that judgment, all that fear has nothing to do with what's happening outside of you. It has to do with what you're allowing inside of you. And there are, of course, many amazing women who are happy to support each other. So we have to believe in that. And then we have to seek to find those women and to allow them into our lives, instead of tolerating, whatever relationships that we've been tolerating in the past that maybe have defined what we believe to be true about the relationships that we need in order to thrive in our future.
Amen to that.
I love that. Yeah, I love that. I think in addition to trust, we definitely have to do some mindset shift around our ideas around women working together. But I can simply say that the boys club doesn't work like this, right? It just doesn't. And so we, again, can be our biggest critic sometimes. And I think that the conversation we have with ourselves it creates barriers that just don't need to be there. I think for me, it's really important, however you can get there, but finding women that can support and join forces together. But beyond that, I think when you do have a band of women together that want to collaborate and move forward together, I often tell people, to your point about like, well, there's only 2 seats at the table that women can fill. I quite frankly say, I don't accept that.
Right.
You need a new table.
Let's make
Get
more.
a bigger table with more chairs. And if the table you get does not fit in the room, baby, get a new room. I need you to get a bigger room. I'm not going to accept that as an answer. And the reason why I say that is because humans created systems, right? Every system we have on this earth is because a human created it or a group of humans created it. So you know how sometimes when you call in a customer service and you're like, this thing doesn't work, or I'm having trouble, and the person's like, well, the system won't let me. But someone in that company created that system or allowed that system to be what it is. All it takes is you just changing the system. We have to decide that we're tired of the system and that we want to change it. And so I think it's really important that we push on these ideas of quotas, or there can only be 2 of us. And I think that when you start to make movement, upward momentum in your career or in life, whatever context we're talking about, I genuinely believe that it's really important to look behind you, like legitimately look behind you, because I guarantee you there are women pushing you up that you can pull with you, right? So for every opportunity, for every panel, every conference, every even job interview, you can recommend another woman. You can give them a list of alternate candidates, even if you're not the right fit. You can demand more representation, right? In the experience or environment that's being created. We just have to simply do. And I think that bias to action is what's really important. But in order to do that, you have to have that network of women. And I see Sarah commented about personal board of directors. It's definitely something that I really greatly value. Like each one of us, okay, so concept here. Just like you think about a company, right? There's a CEO of that company, and that company, if it's publicly traded company, even private, has a board of directors. That's the advisors of that business, right? Of that entity that you go to quarterly or whatever to say, I have an idea. What do you think? Each of us as women, we need our own personal board of directors, right? Somebody for finance, somebody for just ideas to spitball, somebody for business, somebody, whatever it is, like you need those 5 to 7 people that you can rely on to say, I have this idea. What do you think? And then that women starts to be your network that you can use to reference, to recommend, to get answers or get network to other women. Like, I don't think and Ashley, you mentioned this earlier in the talk, like you talked about strategic. I think we as women don't lean into the strategic abilities that we can have, that we're more than capable of having, right? Like thinking strategically about an opportunity and saying, how can I make this better for me and for other women that I know, right? Like, I think it first starts with a question and then saying, I know enough women, and then doing something about it. Like, I think we tend to play small because the world has told us that's the only way that we could play confidently, when in reality, we could play as big as we want to and not apologize for it. So stop saying sorry and just do, right? Stop saying sorry and just act. But the people around you, the personal board of directors, is where you can get the support, is where you can start to fight for change, is where you can start to fight for upward momentum. And I don't think we do enough as women to say, look around us, and for every opportunity I get, how do I pull another woman into this? Like, legitimately, men do it all the time, relentlessly, right? Like, I can't tell you how many men come into organizations that I've been a part of, major multi-billion-dollar corporations, and the next leader is so-and-so's friend that he knew at the previous company. Like, come on, we can do that too, and we could do it better, because in a lot of ways, women are just that amazing. But we should start to do that for everything we have as an opportunity that can be considered an opportunity. Like, start asking yourself, this is a great opportunity, but how can I get more women involved in this? How can I bring another woman that I personally know involved? Or how can I use my network to go get other women? I'll give you a perfect example. So I just finished my graduate degree at Northwestern, and we had a professor sadly pass away in the spring. I think we were in a 5-week course, we were on like week 2, and he passed away. And the program is actively looking for someone to fill this spot, right? And so I raised my hand and I said, I've got a list of 10 women you can interview today. Right? Like, and they were like, well, can you get us more candidates? Absolutely. I'm going to use my networks, right? I'm going to go, even if I don't actually know the woman personally, I'm going to trust that you're in my network, you're a friend of a friend of a friend, or, your coworker of a whatever. And I'm going to use my network to get as many women listed, right? To interview, right? We have to be willing to do that for one another. And ultimately what that means is when you pull other women up, women will push you up. Like it's a ripple effect, and we can't lose sight of that.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I love that. That's like my favorite answer. That's my favorite answer in the whole world. Yeah, I think that's the beautiful thing is when we recognize, kind of piggybacking on that, like when we give ourselves permission to, stand in our own power, we give someone else, but it's like when we help bring someone into that power with us, that's incredibly powerful. I know that it's one of my favorite things to do. Like, absolutely. I remember I have friends who do summits and stuff. I was like, man, I got like 15 women right here that would just like die to do this right now. Just hold on. Just let me get them for you. All right. So we're going to navigate a little bit into the next piece. Is like when you get to the table, what happens when we get there? And that's the fear of success. And I think this is a very real fear that's not discussed. What happens when we get that promotion or we're offered that high level position? What happens for women? So Ashley, since this is your bread and butter, I'd like you to get us started on what that fear of success actually looks like.
Yeah. So it's interesting. It makes me think of like, I had like a certain income level set in my business per month. And I remember the first time that I hit it and I freaked out, right? I'm like, holy crap, all this work that I did. And, it finally happened. And then for like months afterwards, I didn't hit it again. Because you finally achieve it, you finally get your seat at the table, or however you want to look at it, and then your brain is like, wait, this is just a fluke, this can't happen again, how did I get here, who do I have to be to maintain it, that was way too easy, right? And again, you're coming up with all these stories about why you just don't deserve it, or why it was a fluke, or why it can't happen again. I think that we make up all these stories based on these assumptions that we have about who you have to be to make a certain level of income, or who you have to be in a certain role, in a certain career, or whatever the goal is for you. For some people it's weight loss or whatever. You have this idea of this thing that you want, but you also have an idea of who you think that you have to be in order to achieve that thing. So if you achieve that thing and then you don't see yourself as those things that you thought you had to be in order to get it, then your brain is going to try to convince you that it's not for you, right? It was a fluke and it's not okay for you to get it. So I think it goes back to reminding yourself consciously of who it is that you believe you are, and having a really clear definition of, because I think sometimes we blindly work towards things, right? We blindly try to achieve our goals without ever really taking a moment to define what success looks like for me. Not what success looks like for the other Ashley, what it looks like for Amber, but what does success look like to me right now? Because again, we have like those big picture dreams in mind, and I'm going to shoot for the book, and I'm going to shoot for being on stage, I'm going to shoot for making, 20K months or whatever. And we don't ever really define, what is it that I want right now, and who is it that I really believe I need to be in order to achieve that thing. And then, and I think this is all going back to having the confidence to ask for that thing, to ask the other people around you to support it as you work towards it, and to ask yourself to believe in yourself enough, to love yourself enough in order to achieve it and have it and keep it.
So, Amber, I would ask you this, so I guess similar questions, like how do you feel the fear of success plays out when you're talking about coming into these, industries where women are not well represented and stuff? How does that really show up and play out in your experience?
Yeah, I think I've done this where we believe that we have to have it perfect, right? Like we've got to just nail it every day. And number one, that's just simply a fallacy. Like you'll be burnt out before you can make any real progress. But I think overcoming the idea that you have to be perfect, like you were given this opportunity for a host of reasons. And I think you have to take inventory of the things that you come into the role or come into the opportunity doing really well, and relying on those things as you learn, but recognizing that stepping into anything new requires learning. Like I think that we have some like weird relationship with new opportunity means I'm supposed to know how to do it. It just like doesn't work like that. Like think of anything that you've done for the first time versus something you've done for the third time. You are inherently better the third time around, right? And so I think really, really giving yourself the grace, right, to like learn and maybe even mess up and be humble enough, like bring enough humility to the conversation, such that when feedback is present, that you're able to receive it and really hear it. And I think that there's a difference between, people that just want to talk crap versus people that actually want to help you learn and grow. But I think we have to, as women, realize, it really is humans in general, that as we step into new opportunities, there will be an inherent challenge, right? Again, going back to the like weightlifting reference, like, yeah, you might have been lifting, doing, 10-pound bicep curls for a while, and that's cool, and you've mastered that. But the moment you step into 12 pounds or 15 pounds, like that's a whole new game. I don't know why you think that you would just go in and like own that, right? So there is an inherent learning curve there, right? You have to, again, kind of start back at zero, build up the strength. I think that that's an internal conversation that we have to be willing to have with ourselves. I think externally facing, though, again, what's really important is that being in these male-dominated spaces, you will face criticism. You will be under the spotlight, probably harsher than your counterparts, because you are a minority. And a minority to me is defined as if you are the underrepresented group in the room, and that could just simply be because of your gender. It certainly could be race or faith or socioeconomic status, but whatever it is, like you coming into that space as a minority, they have the upper hand. And so I think it's really important that you do rely on what your strengths are, but going back to who's your group of people, who's your squad. And I think even if you can't necessarily find other women, right, to lean into at work or lean into in these opportunities, you've got to find people, right, that you can go to behind closed doors and be like, I'm really struggling with this thing and I don't know how to really tackle it. Can you help me just talk through it? Because much to the conversation we had earlier, like part of the feelings that we have sometimes are so short, but we create these stories, right, about how crazy they are, and they create this spiral. But in reality, so much of even what we have to learn is so achievable. We just have to get out of our own way. So I think it's really important to give yourself grace, right? And then find people in your organization or in your group, right? Rely on that board of directors, rely on that circle of trust to bounce ideas off of in a safe space where you can fail forward and then go back out into the meeting or the boardroom and own it. And it's an evolution. Like you got to learn this and grow through this, just like everything else, previously. And I think that confidence, that repetition will come, with time. But I think that we have to, I won't pretend to suggest that being a woman in male dominated spaces isn't hard, even when you are the expert. So I think with leadership comes criticism, right? So we have to be willing to create space for that, but not let it overwhelm us.
Yes, I love that. I will say test it. The biggest thing that's come with like any of these fears is just understanding, not being afraid of my own voice. And I feel like this is huge. So not being afraid of my own power. So it's like when you get here and it comes to you, we get a little nervous and we want to back out and go, surely I can't be that powerful of a human being. And, I think that that's something that's come up for me. And I've had to learn to really just walk through that and give myself grace through that process. Because again, what you just said, Amber, we don't go into something automatically knowing it, right? You don't just go into it and it's, got all the skills, so it's going to be okay. So the beautiful thing about coming into a space where we're finally taking up our seat at the table, and when we're coming into that success is really understanding, Ashley, what you said, like, what does that success look like to us now, and how can we get that success for ourselves? So for me, it's what I'll suggest, because I think you guys have given some wonderful thoughts here, is flipping that on its head. So how can I use that fear to motivate me and kind of keep pushing me through and keep pushing me forward to what it is that I want to achieve on this, in whatever it is that I'm doing, whether that's going and becoming the top woman CEO, or, just having, maybe making success where I'm just home and more present with my children every day. So ladies, we are right at the end. Like, this goes crazy. So I'd love to get final thoughts on you. If there's anything that you would really just love to end this with, and then how can people connect with you? So Ashley, we'll start with you first. Is there, final notes, final thoughts that you'd like to give to any of the women out there who might be dealing with, fear of success, fear of imposter syndrome, fear of just even taking up space and taking their seat at the table, and then let everybody know how they can connect with you?
Yeah, definitely. I just want to, I guess, conclude by saying, whenever you're doubting yourself, whenever you have that fear, whenever it seems impossible, just to reconnect with that power. Ask yourself, how can I show up in a more powerful way? Because it is never, ever true that you can't do it. It's just a matter of whether or not you're willing to do it, and whether or not you're willing to do it through the fear. And just like, I love that Amber reminded us that it is about being okay with it not being perfect, because it's never going to be perfect. I get terrified every time I have a conversation. I'm terrified every time I have a new client. I'm terrified every time there's a new opportunity or I reach a new income level. There is a new, what do they say, like, new level, new devil, whatever. There's always going to be something to be scared of. So always go back to, how can I show up in a more powerful way in this moment? And sometimes that means taking action. Sometimes it means allowing yourself to just kind of surrender to the emotion and feeling it and then moving on, right? Always, always, always ask yourself, how can I show up as the most powerful version of myself just in this moment? Thank you guys so much for having me. Should I go ahead and let them know where they can find me now? Or are we doing that at the end?
I'm realizing I'm talking to you. Yes, please let them know where they can find you. And please feel free after this, send me your links. I have to restructure how I do this.
No,
But yeah, please feel free to drop links. Again, one of my things, and one of y'all, I think we all might have touched on this, is like bringing other women with us. So it's important to me that, this isn't just my show and you guys come on here. You get to tell everybody about how they can work with you, because to me, there's always that one woman out there, and one of y'all touches one of them. You know what I mean? So, if I can use my network to help other women come up and bring their messages out to the world, then I'm working in my purpose every single day. So yeah, tell everybody where they can find you, best ways to connect, and how you can serve them.
Yeah, definitely. My favorite place to hang out is really just Facebook. So you can either add me as a friend on Facebook. It's facebook.com/arainsbarger. Or, if you are a coach and you're interested in kind of like the mindset and the energy behind, higher income in your coaching business, then you can join my Facebook group, which is Money Mindset for 2K Coaches.
Awesome. So, all right, Amber, any final thoughts? And please let them know how people can connect with you and how you serve people in this role.
Yeah, just a reminder, you can never love on yourself too much. I think it's really important to put yourself first in your journey to growth and excellence, whatever that means for you. And then secondly, make sure that you have a community of women that you can lean into. You should get them when times are good, not when times are bad, so that when things do go wrong, you've got someone to call. But yeah, I sincerely appreciate the time today. It was great to chat with you ladies and to speak to all of you that are listening and watching right now. You can reach me a couple of ways. One is just emailing me. My email is hello@amberlhull.com. Feel free to reach out. We can chat if you have any questions. Happy to start a conversation. I also have a social media presence. It's under the Chief Hustler Instagram handle. Hustler is spelled with an H at the end, HER, really focused on women aspiring for excellence in corporate America and really just overcoming those work challenges. So feel free to follow me there as well.
You guys already know where to connect with me, but please stay present on this platform as we now transition into going into a TV show come October. I'm very excited. So thank you ladies so much. And thank you guys for challenging me. Every time I come on the show, let me tell you, the imposter syndrome just pops up because I'm just like, oh my God, was that a good question? And just really helping me to lean into learning to become better at doing this. Because as you guys have so nicely shown a lot on this, we all start not being the expert, and it gets better over time. Like I when I talk about this, you guys, before we get off, I always like to reminisce back to how this show started and how it looked when it started.
Yeah.
Now, over 100 episodes later, I can tell you it's a whole lot better, but still, guys. So, thank you guys so much for everybody that came here. If you catch us on the replay, please hashtag replay. Let us know your thoughts. Please share these episodes, connect with these ladies, and please keep staying present again with this platform as it grows, as it brings on more women, have more awesome conversations, and when you guys can just watch us on Roku and Amazon and Apple TV. I'm so excited, y'all. All right. So thank you guys so much. Thank you, ladies, so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. It was so nice to talk to you guys.
Yeah.
See you guys Thursday, 7:30 p.m. Eastern.